Anelia Varela is CEO at The Writer, a brand language consultancy that makes shift happen. What kind of shift are you making happen at The Writer, Anelia?
So we work with brands and businesses all over the world to really help them use their words to shift attitudes and perceptions and behaviors and company cultures and even the world.
That,
So yes, but very important. Thank you for pronouncing it shift.
I worked really hard at getting that exactly right. Anyway, it's so good to see you again. You and I met a long time ago at a brand conference, and we've done a couple of other programs together, and it's always great to catch up with you on some of this stuff. I'm very interested in your perspectives on the impact of words and writing as it relates to maybe a little bit the science, but more importantly, the scare tactics or some of the terminology that we're hearing as we move through this COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating time for communications because you're absolutely right. There's a lot of scare tactics going on because obviously governments need people to take this seriously and they need people to act. And so you are finding them using terminology like shelter in place orders. And that's a particularly interesting term because, that harks back to the Cold War and chemical warfare and even, mass shootings and tornadoes and, all of those kind of shelter in place orders. So there's a real sense of emergency there. Um, I think that the problem comes in when people start feeling like they are being ordered to do something, like they are having their freedoms taken away, which obviously, especially here in the US, is a very, very big deal. And so, you start hearing words like isolation, you
Mhm.
must isolate. And there's just nothing positive about that language. And so potentially people are less likely to comply when you say stay at home. That's an order. You must stay at home. So interestingly, that the language of the scare tactics might actually be having the opposite effect, where
Mhm.
that kind of almost rebellious human spirit kicks in, and people start saying, "Well, you can't tell me what to do. I have to do exactly the opposite."
I know.
So it is that very, very fine line to tread. But actually, one of the best examples of effective communication during this time that I've seen came from Ireland, where the government brought out a series of posters, and they had headlines along the lines of protect each other, play a part, protect each other, shop apart. And if we unpick that a little bit, they're doing a lot of really, really clever but quite nuanced things there. So the idea of protect each other, they are leading with the benefits of doing that. There's something in this for you and for the people around you. But then even that phrase each other, if they had said protect others, it suddenly becomes this kind of faceless mass, like
Hmm.
care
Hmm.
about these strangers around me. But each other implies that familiarity. You're there with someone and you are protecting each other. So you are protecting them and they are protecting you in return.
Hmm.
That's a very, very powerful phrase right there. And then the second half is like the opposite of the language of restriction, because you're saying shop apart, play apart. You can still play, you can still shop,
Right.
but do so at a safe distance. So I thought that was um, really a way of still getting the message across in a way that might make people more likely to comply without having to resort to scare tactics.
Yeah, the darker language, you know what I mean? The
Yeah.
darker implication. That is clever. I'm interested, I don't know, sometimes it feels like it's unavoidable. Is there any way to avoid this rather loaded language? The Irish example is a good one, but I mean, it's some of it feels almost scientific, and we're dealt with this coldness. Is there any way to avoid it, or should we avoid it?
Well, there's a lot of dehumanizing happening right now. And when you think about some of the shocking statistics that are coming out, what are we at, about 80,000 deaths in the US now? And that's the way it's being reported, 80,000 deaths. Um, But actually, the seemingly softer way of saying that,
Mm-hmm.
potentially much more impactful. Because if you say 80,000 people have died,
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly you are putting a more human face to that statistic.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the big scare tactic of, oh, 80,000 deaths.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but actually 80,000 people have died.
Mm-hmm.
So just bringing that humanity back into it can actually
Mm-hmm.
be more effective.
And the final question, it's a question I ask everybody, is Anelia, what lessons are we learning now that we must never forget?
Well, from a communication point of view, I really hope that leaders are being and will continue to be held to a higher standard when it comes to their communication. So, I think there's a real need now more than ever to really be sincere and honest and direct and authentic. I don't think leaders will be able to hide between the business jargon and the corporate cliches anymore. I think they have to face difficult messages head on and just be direct with those. Obviously, one of the unfortunate things that we're seeing right now, that we're going to continue seeing for quite a while, is mass layoffs all over the world. And that's another kind of situation where people tend to slip into this dehumanizing language, almost like a defense mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So by talking about reduced headcount, you might make yourself feel better in that
Mm-hmm.
situation where you're having to communicate it, but it's making you come across as quite cold and heartless.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, leaders have been getting away with that. And I think the world is going to be calling out for more openness and authenticity in their communication.
Excellent. I always feel smarter after I talk to you for some reason. Thank you so much for your time, and maybe at some point we could loop back around and discuss further.
Hopefully over an actual coffee. Wouldn't that be nice? Great to see you, Dave. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.